what I tell a lot of young people these days is just give it 10 years, and they always laugh. Like when I started out, I got my foot in the door and got a job with a kids TV company, and I was editing like kids puppet shows. Once I got my foot in the door, then I kind of tried to push myself in a certain direction. So it's good to kind of have a 10-year plan in your head about where you want to be, and then gently kind of push yourself in that direction and make the decisions that are going to lead you in that direction.
Hi, and welcome back to StudioBinder Academy. I'm Brandon. Today we're speaking with editor Brian Philip Davis, whose work includes The Devil's Doorway, Boys from County Hell, and Oddity. Brian, thank you so much for being here today.
How's it going?
So Brian, we always like to start with people's backgrounds. Could you tell us what inspired you to become a filmmaker?
Well, I was kind of an 80s kid, so I grew up watching stuff like on the sofa with my dad on a Saturday night, like Terminator, Commando, Predator. He was a bit of an Arnie fan. Stuff like RoboCop, Ghostbusters, they were kind of like my go-tos. So it was like all the classics.
But whatever it is, it's got to get by us. Right. Go get her, Ray.
And I was into comic books as well, like Spider-Man, Batman. But I lived in the countryside, so I didn't get to go to the movie theaters that often. So maybe like once a year for my birthday. That's like so sad to say that. So going to the movie theater was like a really big deal. So I had to like pick the thing that I wanted to go and see. And I remember one time I went to see Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 2: Secret of the Ooze, but there was an issue with the projector or something, and they couldn't show it, so they had to show us something else instead. And that movie was Edward Scissorhands by Tim Burton. So I had no idea as like an 11-year-old kid or whatever, what this was, and it just kind of blew my mind. And seeing Edward Scissorhands was like the first time I realized that movies were like these kind of designed things, like they were like these, it was possible to have like a filmmaker's vision on screen. And that's what got me into kind of filmmaking. I kind of then started getting interested in like, very kind of visual filmmakers like David Lynch or David Cronenberg or Sam Raimi, people like that. That's what kind of, lit the fuse for filmmaking.
All right. Excellent. I always love when things happen like that. Life always tends to happen like this. Happenstance. She's like, oh, I went to go see this movie, but this one just really put me on to something else.
Yeah, it's a happy accident.
Absolutely. And was there anything that drew you to editing specifically?
So I went to art college. I thought I was going to be a graphic designer. I still hadn't really thought about filmmaking as a career as such at this point. Studying to be a graphic designer, and then I did this course at university called visual communication, and that involved graphic design, but it also involved like you could do animation, you could do photography, you could make little short films. So I kind of started making these little short animated films, and then I got bored of that. I was sick of like doing so much drawing, so I started using like actors and doing live action stuff, which I was editing myself. So I was only editing myself out of like necessity because I didn't have anybody else to help me with that. So that's when I first started editing, and then I continued making like little short films, like music videos and things of my own, which I edited myself, and then eventually started getting asked by other people, like other filmmakers, short filmmakers, if I could edit stuff for them. And then I realized, this is something that could become a career. I could actually get paid to do this.
You said, you just kind of, out of necessity, became your own editor, and I find that in the industry a lot. People always say work begets work. Was it, just somebody saw your work, your editing styles, and was just like, hey, we need an editor? Or how did that kind of come along?
Yeah, so I was making short films, and I was going along to different like meetups, like short film festivals or like just little meetups that were happening in bars and things. Like like short film screenings. You would just show your work and then like have a chat afterwards. There'd be other people around. So that's where you would meet like other collaborators, like other filmmakers. And I met this one guy who I continued to do like a ton of short films for. And then eventually he got a feature film off the ground. And this is a guy called Chris Ball. And the feature film is called Bad Day for the Cut. And that movie eventually ended up getting into Sundance in 2017. And that was kind of the beginning of my career in feature films.
Excellent. And is there any advice that you would give someone that's looking to become a professional editor?
Yeah, I mean, I would just say start editing. If you want to be an editor, start editing. Just edit whatever you can. Get your hands on anything like a short film, a music video, a corporate video, whatever you can get your hands on, just start editing. You learn editing from doing editing. You can't, there's no secrets. You just have to have experience, and that takes time. You can learn the software from watching YouTube videos, but to learn how to edit, you just have to start editing and get the experience. And I think your goal is to get as many credits as an editor. So if you want to be an editor, you need to have credits to say that you were the editor. So it's like then having a show reel with lots of different things that you have edited, and now all of a sudden you're an editor.
Excellent. And now you're based in Ireland, that's correct?
Yeah, I'm based in Belfast.
Okay, all right. And are there any major differences between the filmmaking industry there in Ireland compared to here in America?
I'd say it's pretty similar. We have bigger projects that are shot here, like Game of Thrones was famous shot here. So there's the massive projects which I'm not working on, and then there's the independent film community, and it's probably very similar to the US. So it's like people just making movies in their backyard and then trying to get those films into festivals and get them distributed around the world. So I'd say there's probably no difference between someone here trying to make an independent film and, someone in their garden in Kansas. It's probably pretty similar,
And as an editor, do you have an agent?
Yes, I do have an agent.
Okay. And how does an editor, come to get an agent?
I'd been emailing tons of agents for a couple of years trying to get an agent, and I found that I couldn't get an agent until I'd actually done something that people had heard of. Like I'd worked on a movie that people had heard of. So that film, Bad Day for the Cut, that I worked on that got into Sundance, that kind of opened the doors for me in terms of agents. So I was contacted by an agent who had seen that film at Sundance. So then all of a sudden, I'd worked on like a film that was legitimate and people had heard of it, and that just opened the doors,
And now with lower budget, indie movies that you kind of mentioned, is there an example of, a solution found in the edit with stemming from, budget limitations or anything during production?
With lower budget things, the limitations then sometimes force you to be a bit more creative. Kind of, you have to come up with creative solutions for problems. Maybe then you'll end up with some happy accidents. But I mean, I don't really think about. I just kind of review the footage that I've been given and then try and figure out what's the best thing to do with it. Like, you're not really thinking about budgets. You're just thinking about how best to tell the story. So even sometimes on a bigger budget production, they don't get everything that they wanted to get. So you're still just dealing with what you have, so it's kind of like a case by case basis.
Now, I want to take you back. If you were able to go back and talk to yourself when you were just starting out, what would you tell yourself? What advice would you give yourself?
The advice I would give myself would be to give it 10 years. And that's what I tell a lot of young people these days, is just give it 10 years. And they always laugh, but it does take time. It takes time to get your foot in the door. And then it takes time, even more time, to get doing what you want to do. So like when I started out, I got my foot in the door and got a job with a kids TV company, and I was editing like kids puppet shows, and I was an editor. It was great. My stuff was going out on TV, but I wasn't really working on the things that I wanted to work on. So after that, I tried to, well, basically I had to start turning work down and, trying to, I felt like I was at a crossroads, and I could be working on kids TV forever, or I could be doing what I want to be doing, which is, movies. So I kind of, once I got my foot in the door, then I kind of tried to push myself in a certain direction. So it's good to kind of have a 10-year plan in your head about where you want to be, and then gently kind of push yourself in that direction and make the decisions that are going to lead you in that direction.
Yeah, everything takes time. And, I've always heard growing up, in careers, in life, anything that's worth having is going to be difficult. But if you see it through, I mean, you'll get where you're going.
Yeah, you just have to be patient, and I live in quite a small country. So I think if you really want to do something, you just have to work hard at it, and you will get there eventually.
When you're editing a horror movie, what's kind of the most important thing when you're in that editing process that you're keeping in mind? Are there any specific techniques or anything that you're looking for?
With horror, it's kind of, there's nothing really specific to horror that I would think of. It's just, I'm telling a story. I'm just always thinking about what is the story that I'm telling, so whatever genre it is you're working in, first and foremost, it's the story that you're dealing with. So my approach is that I'm trying to get what's on the script onto the screen. So, I'm reading a script that's been written by a writer. The audience see images and hear sounds, and their brain has to write the script in their head, depending on what it is that they're taking in. And then it's my job to make sure that the audience writes the same script that the screenwriter wrote. If that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely.
So I'm trying to imagine myself almost like when I'm working on something, I'm trying to imagine myself as the audience member, and I'm thinking, what do I need to see in front of me right now in order to tell this story?
Definitely. Yeah, that's so smart. I mean, because you kind of are the audience of one at that time. So whatever you feel, makes you scared or, makes you feel something in the edit, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, and it's difficult with horror because, something will scare you the first time you watch it, but then if you watch it a second time, third time, fourth time, it gets less and less effective the more times you watch it. So you're always trying to remember, how is this going to work on a first-time viewer? And it's important to always remember that in your head, that most people will only see this film once.
What would you say was the most challenging part of editing Oddity?
I think with Oddity, one of the challenges was definitely the wooden man. So we have this kind of, wooden man character that doesn't do a lot, but is quite intimidating and threatening just from its presence. It was definitely, I think throughout the film, we were just trying to make sure that we used the exact right amount of the wooden man. I think if we use too much of the wooden man, it probably becomes less scary. But sometimes we wanted to cut to him in a way that was actually funny. There's quite a good scene where we have two characters kind of having a conversation at a dinner table, and then it kind of cuts to the wide and you see the wooden man like observing the conversation. It was things like that. But then at the end, when the wooden man becomes a little more active, we just went with the alien approach that kind of less is more, and tried to show as little of them as possible. So I think what people could come up with in their imagination is way more scarier than what we could put on screen. So that was the approach we took.
And was there any, major changes that happened in the edit? Any surprises or anything that you just last minute had to make a complete change from the script or whatever the case may be?
The order of everything in Oddity's script was very different to what we ended up with in the final cut. So it's a bit of an ensemble piece. There's a lot of different characters in it. So it was quite interchangeable. You know, we could change the order of things, so we did. We just started kind of experimenting with different orders and seeing things at different points and like revealing things at different points just to see how it would work. And it was something we found in the edit. I mean, we had all the material to make the movie, but we just didn't necessarily use it in the way in which it was kind of laid out in the script. So like the scene at the beginning of the movie with Olin at the door trying to convince Danny to let him into the house, that was like half an hour into the script originally.
Oh, wow. That's interesting.
Yeah, but it just worked so well as an opener. We had to put it right up at the top, and I think that was a good call. It definitely gets people hooked.
Definitely. Yeah, it definitely set the tone. As soon as I saw that, I was like, ooh, this does have a really creepy vibe to it.
Yeah.
Sound and music are typically pretty big components in a horror film. Could you walk us through a scene or a moment in the film where you and the sound designers or composers kind of collaborated together to make it all come together?
Yeah, I mean, one of the major sound design elements was the wooden man and the sound of the wooden man. How was this thing going to sound? So Damien, the director, and I had tried a lot of different things in the edit. We'd messed around with various types of screams, male and female, and lots of things like layered on top of each other. We tried something like that they'd done in Patrick Swayze movie Ghost. They had the sound of like a baby slowed down, which is one of the most terrifying sounds you could ever hear. We tried stuff like that. So we were trying lots of stuff in our edit, but then Isa Hand, the sound designer, came on board, and he actually came in started earlier than he was supposed to, and helped us out trying out some different things for the wooden man. We kind of exported like a 20-minute sequence for him, and he was able to try lots of different stuff, and it just got us kind of, it was good to do a little bit of work early on that so that we had an idea about what he was doing. And then once we had an idea of where he was going with that, we found like we wanted to extend certain shots or linger on certain shots because we knew that there was going to be an overarching sound over that shot, you know, so it needed to be a little bit longer. He would come in and advise about, you know, I think we could be a little longer on this or a little shorter on that, and I'll do this kind of thing. So it was just trying to collaborate and make sure we were all on the same page before we'd actually locked the movie.
Now, going back to that scene that we talked about when the opening scene, could you kind of walk us through? You know, I know you said it moved from an hour and a half into the beginning. Yeah. What was kind of your goal in that scene as far as editing goes?
The scene it's at the beginning of the film when Olin arrives at Danny's house and he's trying to convince her to let him in. He's telling Danny that there's someone else in the house with her. So at this point in the film, as an audience, we're kind of unsure whether he's telling the truth or not. And one of the tricky things, you know, for us as filmmakers is that we already know the answer to the question. We don't want the audience to know it just yet. So the challenge was to make the scene, you know, threatening, to make Olin appear threatening, even though we're going to find out later that this wasn't actually the case. And I remember doing things like cutting in little extra sounds of like banging the door, like to make it sound like he was a little bit more aggressive, a little bit more frantic, you know, on edge.
Just open the door. I'm trying to help you.
Than maybe he was actually delivering in the performance. So, you know, just doing whatever we could to try and ramp up the tension. You know, so hopefully for a first-time viewer, the idea of someone turning up at your door in the middle of the night is scary enough. We just wanted to really push that as much as possible without completely cheating the audience about the twist, you know?
Yeah, well, you definitely pulled it off. Like I said, that opening scene, it leaves the viewer just like, is he bad? Is he good?
Yeah.
But just the whole tone of the film is set right there, and it was fantastic.
That's great. It's really difficult to know sometimes, like if we've got it right or not. So another thing we did was have a test screening. So we had a test screening in Dublin. So when we showed it to an audience in Dublin, you could kind of feel the vibe in the room that everybody was very uncomfortable and scared. So that's when we really knew it was working at that point.
Well, Brian, it's been such a pleasure. Those are all the questions we have for you today. Thank you so much for taking the time to answer them.
No problem.
If you're looking for more interviews or deep dives into the StudioBinder software, be sure to like and subscribe to be notified when new videos are added. I'm Brandon with StudioBinder Academy. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.